Let us begin our forensic investigation into a highly suspicious open-water disappearance.
We are on the ground at Elbow Cay in the Bahamas, analyzing the primary scene.
This marina marks the final location where Lynette Hooker was spotted before her suspicious disappearance. She supposedly went overboard from the dinghy she shared with Brian Hooker. You and I must carefully analyze this highly suspicious timeline.
However, interviews with key local witnesses are finally helping us reconstruct the sequence of events.
We have gathered critical testimony from the initial search and rescue operators. These are the individuals who observed the husband and recovered the abandoned watercraft from the shoreline. Crucially, two separate boaters who transported the husband during those critical hours. They engaged in extensive, unprompted conversations with him. They boarded the yacht Soulmate, securing the drifting dinghy and winching it back onto the primary vessel. The ambient audio you hear is from a nearby wedding reception, a stark contrast to our grim task. Scanning the perimeter of this harbor, we see the Hopetown Inn and Marina. The picturesque setting makes the underlying dark reality of this mystery even more chilling.
Pardon any festive noise as we focus strictly on examining the evidence.
For local context, the striped lighthouse standing over the bay is a rare hand-cranked, kerosene-fueled beacon, which continues to illuminate these potentially treacherous waters. Highly unique. It draws constant civilian traffic to this specific sector of Elbow Cay, which means potential unrecorded witnesses. Let us review our primary interview. We analyzed statements from Pete Calling of the Hopetown Fire and Rescue Unit. As team leader, he responded early Sunday morning on April 5th.
This is the precise morning when Brian Hooker washed ashore on Marsh Harbor, a distance of 4 full miles across open water from Elbow Cay.
Calling immediately mobilized his volunteer rescue team to assess the escalating situation. He did not just coordinate the coastal search, scouring the shoreline alongside volunteers for any sign of Lynette. He also closely monitored Brian Hooker himself. His first-hand testimony is highly valuable to us, given his deep, specialized knowledge of these local currents. A 10-year resident who understands the geography, operating as an active responder for fire and rescue. Now, you and I need to examine some critical developments within the previous 12 to 24 hours. This is a highly insular community. With a 7-mile island containing only a few hundred residents, unverified theories and rumors began spreading faster than actual police updates. On the night of Thursday, April 16th, our investigation took a sudden turn. Right around 10:30 that evening, while my colleague and I were compiling our investigative logs, we received an urgent, unconfirmed report that a body had indeed been located. The tip-off included specific coordinates, an alleged shallow grave, and police activity. We immediately mobilized, though navigating this archipelago at night poses severe challenges. We had to secure immediate water transport from this exact dock to cross the channel and establish contact, heading directly toward the Hopetown mainland from our isolated position at the marina. We rushed to the Abaco Inn, identified by our sources as the focal point of the active police response. But the site was completely dark. No police presence whatsoever. Our team pushed further down the coastline to the Sea Spray Inn and Marina, scouting the alleged primary crime scene, the rumored location of the shallow grave. Our initial sweep revealed zero signs of disturbance, no active law enforcement presence, and zero physical activity on site. Local staff interviews confirmed the marina has remained completely quiet lately. We noted only a single remaining patron as the venue was locking up. This lead was entirely unsubstantiated, despite the local rumor mill working overtime across the island. Whispers multiplying at every turn. Pure speculation. We quickly debunked it before the hysteria spread any further. Deploying onto dark waters between 10:30 and 11:30 p.m. is grueling work, requiring us to cross channels and drive inland just to verify the intel. We conducted the reconnaissance anyway. The result was absolute silence. No grave.
We must also track another key individual, Carly Aylesworth, who is Lynette Hooker's daughter.
Flight logs show her arriving yesterday in Nassau, a brief 30-minute flight from our current position.
By morning, she and her partner Steve had touched down in Marsh Harbor.
Marsh Harbor sits roughly 4 miles away from my stakeout on Elbow Cay.
Just a 4-mile maritime crossing.
Brian claims Lynette went overboard with the ignition key, forcing his disabled vessel to drift those exact 4 miles straight to Marsh Harbor.
Now that they have landed at Marsh Harbor, their next move is to cross over here,
likely utilizing the local ferry system.
Our timeline suggests they will attempt to reach Elbow Cay tomorrow morning.
We are maintaining surveillance. Meanwhile, we observed significant police movement today.
It matches the daily pattern of this investigation. Here is what we confirmed.
The foreign recovery team, specifically the specialists handling the search dog,
were documented by an eyewitness. Photographic evidence shows them boarding a transport ferry alongside their cadaver dog.
The canine is a smaller breed wearing a sheriff collar, identified as Maggie. This sighting occurred on the 8 a.m. ferry route connecting Hopetown to Marsh Harbor. From a tactical standpoint, this public transit choice is highly unusual for a major operation.
Local authorities possess dedicated marine assets that should have escorted the search team.
Instead, they relied on public civilian ferries to transport the specialized canine. Concurrently, our team monitored separate operational movements. 3 task force members from the same agency we identified yesterday. United States Coast Guard investigators were spotted on scene. This trio was observed conducting grid searches where Brian's dinghy was recovered, specifically 150 yards south of the local boatyard. We will dissect the forensic relevance of these specific locations as we proceed.
Active search and recovery patterns continue to dominate the Marsh Harbor area.
The search grid remains highly active. Furthermore, we logged the American recovery team deploying at 8 a.m. to Marsh Harbor, immediately preceding these systematic search operations. Within 2 hours, 3 operators were actively scouring the shoreline. Operational tempo remains high. The scene remains dynamic, though we are currently separating credible intelligence from the inevitable noise of the case. Casual rumors originating entirely on social media. We always handle these crucial details with extreme care. But investigators are finally piecing together the final steps of Brian and Lynette. You and I must analyze my debriefing with Pete Colling. To understand his statement, we met him at the Firefly Resort. Let's trace this critical location on Elbow Cay, where they were confirmed to have visited. This is where Brian and Lynette Hooker were seen together during her final documented hours. Their timeline at the resort runs from 11 in the morning until around 4. At that hour, they pulled up their anchor near the resort shore, moving their live-aboard yacht, the Soulmate, just a short distance. We estimated less than a quarter of a mile toward the Abaco Inn and Resort, the final place any independent witness saw her before she vanished. Now, let us dissect my debriefing with Pete Colling. He serves as the coordinator for the Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue. He was on scene that morning, arriving around 7 o'clock to coordinate the search for Lynette, while assessing Brian's highly suspicious account.
Since he had washed up on the beach just a few hours earlier,
the team immediately began cross-referencing his alibi with environmental factors like wind directions and wave patterns.
Pete holds crucial intelligence regarding those initial hours.
As a direct responder, he witnessed the early search and observed Brian's immediate post-incident behavior. From an analytical standpoint, that interaction is critical. I pressed him for details on Brian's exact phrasing, physical tics, and overall psychological state, and what his physical actions suggested at the scene. During those critical moments spent one-on-one with Brian Hooker.
let's review my interview with Pete Colling. We pause briefly to thank our sponsor, Wildgrain.
If you appreciate high-quality fresh bread but lack the time to seek out local bakeries,
this service stands out as one of the most straightforward subscriptions available. Wild Grain delivers clean, bake-from-frozen sourdough loaves, fine pastries, and fresh pasta directly to your residence.
Each product utilizes pure, recognizable ingredients rather than processed additives.
The result is an excellent flavor profile that remains easy on digestion.
The process is simple. Bake directly from the freezer with zero thawing required.
with no preparation, a fresh bakery-quality aroma fills your space in 25 minutes.
The collective evidence supports this evaluation.
Backed by over 40,000 five-star ratings and recognized 3 years running as the top food box by USA Today.
For a brief period, Wild Grain is providing our audience $30 off the initial order, along with complimentary croissants for life at wildgrain.com/Banfield when you begin.
Secure that $30 discount on your first order.
And lifetime croissants at wildgrain.com/Banfield, or enter the code Banfield during checkout.
Let us begin. Walk me through that specific morning. What was your perspective upon arriving?
Our agency received the dispatch at Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue at precisely 5:12 a.m.
My own deployment to the scene occurred slightly later in the morning.
But 5 of our first responders boarded our rescue vessel with 0 delay.
And I immediately coordinated with local police in Marsh Harbor, right where the abandoned dinghy had been recovered.
A couple of hours later, I met up with them,
alongside another investigator aboard his own private vessel. Our team immediately canvassed the entire area south of the recovered dinghy, desperately searching for any clues or anomalies on the water.
Unfortunately, that initial day of searching yielded absolutely no trace of her. Our primary task was analyzing his initial statements to the authorities when he first initiated contact with investigators,
Such as the location where she supposedly fell overboard,
the exact timeline of his arrival back on dry land, and his curious claim of losing an oar along the way.
He claimed he lost an oar. Yes, that was his official story.
He insisted that he had temporarily anchored his small craft
And deployed a flare.
a single distress signal, or several. Was his testimony consistent?
His account on that remained highly vague.
Understood.
Yet he definitely claimed a signal was sent. That was our understanding. Let's examine the facts here. You and I know these treacherous coastal waters.
Experienced mariners understand that a flare launched at 8 p.m. in pitch darkness is unmistakable.
Would other vessels instantly recognize it as an active distress call?
One would assume so, though it is not completely impossible to miss. As investigators, we must deal strictly in hard evidence, and while highly improbable,
It remains theoretically possible
that he deployed a signal and simply had no eyewitnesses in the vicinity.
But professionally, I find that scenario highly unlikely. That Saturday night was active, and the local anchorages were crowded.
If any sailor spots a flare, word spreads instantly to search and rescue, yet our dispatch received absolutely 0 reports of distress signals that night.
From my own extensive experience analyzing maritime incidents and being on the water, dusk is typically the most active and busy period for sailors on their decks, making them highly observant of any sudden lights illuminating the evening sky. Is it reasonable to conclude that a significant number of boaters would have been present at that harbor anchorage on Saturday? Absolutely. There would have been plenty of potential eyewitnesses nearby,
Positioned perfectly to spot a flare.
indeed. Yet 0 reports were filed. Not a single one came in. Now, let's analyze the behavior observed during that first encounter with Brian.
My colleague and I initiated contact on Monday morning.
We had spent all of Sunday conducting search operations.
Following up on Monday morning,
We notified the local police departments of our intention to recover and analyze the dinghy ourselves. So my fellow investigator and I,
dispatched in his private boat,
utilizing its compact size
to navigate the shallow, narrow inlets of the harbor.
We successfully navigated the area and secured the vessel.
Today, we study the deputy wading through waist-deep water to investigate. He cautiously approached the beached dinghy.
We must establish if he was indeed the first official to locate the craft.
He was the first from his department on site.
The crime scene remained completely undisturbed.
The officer immediately noted a single oar inside the vessel.
We had to verify claims that the paddle was broken.
But the oar was completely intact.
There was simply no second paddle to be found.
A single discharged emergency flare sat on the floor.
Forensics confirmed the distress signal had indeed been fired.
Indeed.
2 standard orange life vests were left on board.
They were tossed carelessly onto the floor of the boat.
We needed to know if this safety gear was still functional. They seemed kept purely for basic legal compliance. While they were cheap, there was no indication they were unusable.
They appeared to be the standard-issue safety gear found on every local vessel.
Oddly, the vessel's anchor was secured to a shoreline tree.
The responder untied it and cataloged the evidence.
The landing itself appears to have been incredibly rough. He apparently crashed onto a very jagged, rocky shoreline.
The terrain there is exceptionally rugged, making any foot travel a serious challenge.
There are absolutely no paved roads or established trails nearby. Just thick, wild brush.
Now, you and I need to analyze how he could have realistically escaped that beach.
How difficult was the hike to the nearest boatyard?
He claimed he struggled through thick, thorny brambles to get help. It would have been an exhausting physical struggle.
This was definitely no quick, simple stroll.
We are talking about a brutal trek, not some quick 5-minute stroll.
It was a grueling hike, made infinitely worse by the pitch-black night.
Would this journey take 10 minutes or over an hour? As investigators, we must put ourselves in the shoes of a panicked person. A person who has absolutely no idea where they are.
Under those conditions, taking an hour to find civilization is highly plausible. And finally, make contact with a witness.
Remember, at 4 a.m., the entire area is dead silent and pitch black.
Sunrise was still hours away. So his timeline is technically possible. But we still have to account for a massive 9-hour gap.
You and I must ask, what really happened during those long missing hours out on the water?
Indeed.
Our background audio reveals this critical debrief took place in a noisy public space.
The ambient chatter is still audible.
Ignore the tourists dining nearby. A local captain confirmed he swam.
That exact 4-mile distance in 2 hours during a race. 4 miles is a grueling distance, but it is entirely possible.
But does it really take 9 hours just to drift there? If we deduct an hour for navigating the shoreline brambles and debris,
that still leaves nearly 8 hours of drifting with the wind. Does that make sense?
The reality is, with a chain of terrible decisions, it could take someone that long.
It is highly improbable, but not completely impossible.
If you and I analyze the wind drift, it should only take 3 to 4 hours.
That is literally half the time he claimed it took. Exactly. To recap, his official statement says he dropped anchor for a while, halted his progress, fired off flares, and attempted to signal passing vessels.
To me, looking at this strictly from an analytical view, not an official one,
the sequence of events he described simply does not hold up.
It defies normal patterns, violating standard behavior, though we cannot rule it out completely. If his story is true, and he actually remained anchored there, spending hours attempting to flag down boats in the dark, before finally surrendering to the current, letting his boat drift, and eventually pulling himself onto dry land. Before hiking out to find help, then yes, the math could work. What about his demeanor when the rescue team first made contact? The witness reports. They retrieved his dinghy that Monday morning,
delivered it back, and pulled up right alongside his vessel.
His immediate reaction was intense gratitude, apparently.
He seemed thrilled to see them, relieved that he now had a way to move around again. He was even eager to hoist the anchor and navigate his vessel straight back to Marsh Harbor.
He told them his family and friends were arriving soon to assist in search operations.
Naturally, the crew was glad to assist.
They helped secure the dinghy on deck.
And he remained exceptionally polite and thankful.
But he was stoic, showing zero overt emotion.
Let's ask ourselves this.
Grief presents differently in everyone.
But did his flat response match a man whose wife had just vanished into the ocean?
Honestly, the witness hesitated to judge, but noted the suspect had military tattoos, indicating he was a former Marine.
Specifically, a USMC tattoo on his shoulder. Right on his shoulder. This military background led the responders to believe he was simply disciplined and detached.
A man who was all business.
Even among veteran sailors here, his level of emotional control was highly unusual.
He was entirely matter-of-fact, just a cold checklist. Do this, do that, and get out of there. Then rush off to pick up his family and resume the search. That was his story.
It wasn't a deep interrogation yet. They just established they both grew up in Michigan. Just some basic small talk about their home state, but nothing more than that.
They connected over Kalamazoo.
Yes, exactly.
From our analysis, that was the entire extent of their friendly banter.
Everything else was strictly business. He assisted in freeing his
boat from its anchor. He hauled in the windlass and secured the anchor.
Before heading to the abandoned dinghy at Marsh Harbor?
Correct. They secured it.
And towed it back across to Elbow Cay, where the soulmate lay anchored.
Correct. But was the suspect actually in the boat with him?
No. He remained aboard his own vessel. They left him there.
So, did he return using the dinghy?
Negative. That dinghy had zero power.
Wait, how did they get back from that grounded vessel at Marsh Harbor all the way to Elbow Cay?
You and I can trace their exact path here. They took a private boat over, hooked up the dinghy, and towed it back to the soulmate, where Brian was waiting for them.
So the suspect was already on board.
Had someone else transported him back to the soulmate?
Correct.
Let's look at the forensic details of that tow. The witness gave a highly detailed, crucial description of the dinghy's behavior. He made it clear he wouldn't trust that vessel. It was incredibly light. He compared it to towing an empty water tube, bouncing and kicking up wildly behind them. It behaved more like a sail than a boat, catching every gust of wind on the water. They were heading straight into the wind, battling rough waves, and it was highly unstable. Definitely not a vessel anyone would want to navigate in rough open waters.
So it wasn't even a rigid inflatable boat.
Just cheap, molded fiberglass. It sat dangerously high on the surface, entirely exposed, and
that was his professional assessment of the craft.
It was simply a very cheaply constructed vessel. Now, if you place
2 passengers inside, say weighing 150 and 200 pounds, that adds up to 350 pounds.
Does that stabilize it? Or does it remain highly hazardous? It was fundamentally too light. Even with weight, it remained an unsafe platform.
Obviously.
Hard to predict in those conditions, but it certainly wasn't built to survive rough ocean waters. We must keep this in mind. As investigators, you and I must focus strictly on the hard facts, while still granting him every benefit of the doubt. But, physically, is it actually possible for someone to just tumble out of that inflatable?
My assessment suggests that hitting a sudden gust would make a vessel like that highly unstable.
Can you recall the exact wind conditions that Saturday night, April 4th, around 7:30?
Honestly, I cannot recall those specifics. However, several of our active patrol officers were on duty that evening, scanning the area.
And
They noted that the wind's direction and sheer force were both quite significant that night.
Local logs show it was a notoriously gusty week, keeping most experienced fishermen entirely off the water. So I cannot verify the exact meteorological data myself.
According to our files, a local captain we worked with reported the wind was steady at around 18 knots.
Yet, we must remember that specific location sits protected on the leeward side of Elbow Cay. While the ocean-facing side could be roaring, this particular harbor remains relatively calm.
Let us consider an 18-knot wind. What would you and I encounter just outside that Abaco Inn channel?
Realistically, it would likely maintain that same 18-knot velocity. We have to factor in that open inlet right at White Sound.
Specifically,
There is very little high ground to block the airflow, allowing the wind to sweep cleanly across the water.
Thus,
By the time a boat reaches the mouth of that channel, the wind pressure is still almost fully active.
the dinghy itself was lightweight,
Acting like a sail.
tossed around like an inner tube trailing a speedboat. It possessed virtually zero stability.
Even with a payload of 400
or 350 pounds, do you buy the theory that she simply bounced right over the side?
Highly improbable, but technically possible.
In my professional estimation, it could. That is your expert opinion. This assessment matters because of your local background.
You understand the currents, you live the nautical life, and you serve in search and rescue.
I am merely a resident here, not a native islander.
Even without local status, a decade of residency grants you immense credibility.
Not quite. While formal status takes time, your first-hand knowledge of these waters remains highly valuable to our case. Your understanding of this environment far exceeds my own.
Now, once you return to Brian's vessel with that inflatable,
With the dinghy, describe what happened next.
We assisted him in securing the tender onto Soulmate.
we hooked onto the dinghy, we hoisted it, and returned the oar, which he placed securely back on his boat, Soulmate.
So the oar was now back on the primary vessel. To be clear, the oar from the dinghy floor was returned to the sailboat.
That was the entire interaction.
As the witness noted, they engaged in very little small talk. The focus was purely on getting the dinghy secured. The suspect hoisted it while the witness held the helm.
The witness kept the vessel steady against the wind while the suspect raised the heavy anchor.
Once the anchor was secured, the suspect returned to the controls. The suspect took over the helm, and the witness returned to his colleague's boat, wishing him well. But then, the suspect made a claim. He promised he would reach out to other local boat owners to secure assistance, to help his family continue the search for his missing wife. A vital statement in our timeline. Surprisingly, the suspect actually did follow up later. What was his exact request?
he was looking to either charter a boat or hire a local captain.
The witness provided him with several contacts in the area. That was the final contact, but did he actually call those numbers?
We believe he did. But whether he actually went out searching on the water with those captains remains completely unverified.
We must look closely at this timeline.
This was immediately after her disappearance the night before.
Actually, it was the Monday.
This gave the suspect only Monday and Tuesday to search before he was arrested on Wednesday, leaving him very little time on the wire.
We still cannot confirm whether he actually went out searching with anyone or not.
Did he make any definitive statements to the witness? Any strong declarations that he would absolutely refuse to leave the island until he found his wife? Did he try to establish that narrative? He did. When the witness offered well wishes, the suspect insisted that he would be staying nearby, stating clearly that he would not leave without her. A consistent story told to multiple witnesses. A vow he repeated several times. So, you and I have to ask, why did he abruptly board a plane and leave? It surprised everyone. His behavioral patterns have raised multiple red flags for investigators, and this sudden departure is a major one. Our team began our local inquiries at a nearby establishment, the otherwise quiet and tranquil Firefly Inn, a peaceful location that is now part of our timeline. Indeed. The couple spent several hours here earlier on that final day. Did any witnesses notice unusual behavior or arguments?
No unusual activities were directly reported to staff during those hours.
However, our investigation verified their presence at another local spot. They were seen at the Abaco Inn that evening.
Beyond that point, the reliable evidence becomes mere speculation.
No direct eyewitnesses have yet come forward to verify their exact movements on that final night.
We have interviewed every potential witness we could find. The couple left absolutely no impression. They faded completely into the background. Usually, in domestic cases like this, you expect reports of explosive arguments, heavy drinking, or intense resentment. Yet here, we have found absolutely no record of tension.
Are locals talking? Have rumors surfaced about any strange behavior?
Exhibited by the victim immediately before she vanished. As investigators, we have sifted through endless local rumors regarding this specific disappearance. Yet none of them point to pre-incident conflict. Neither have we.
Even after questioning staff at the Abaco Inn.
The employee working that night did not even recall their presence, completely failing to recognize their descriptions.
They merely lounged by the pool and ordered 2 rounds of drinks.
Just simple orders, rum and soda. No loud scenes, no memorable events. Which directly contradicts the violent abduction theories the local police are actively pursuing. Now, if a physical struggle or some form of assault actually took place, there would be some behavioral indicators leading up to it. But we find zero evidence of that. Not a single witness confirms it. Let's examine the geography together. I discussed the Sea of Abaco with local deputies.
It is incredibly shallow. During our boat patrol, the sandy floor was visible the entire way.
If a body were in these waters, search teams would locate it quickly, correct?
Historically, drowning victims or overboard passengers are almost always recovered in these shallow channels.
Yet, anomalies do happen. Consider this. Our records show no cases over the last decade of a missing boater never being recovered. Except for one cold case back in 2015, when a local fisherman vanished from his vessel, and his remains were never located.
That occurred near Marsh Harbor?
Precisely. The incident was in Marsh Harbor. Is the depth greater there? Not significantly. No, the entire basin leading to Great Abaco is remarkably flat and shallow. On the following Monday morning, that very Sunday afternoon, my deputy and I shifted focus after we completed the land-based search along the Marsh Harbor coast, scanning both sides of the point where the dinghy drifted ashore. We then returned directly to the suspected point of entry. Using that coordinate, we charted a 40-degree search cone outward, calculating current drift and local wind vectors. Indeed, we established a triangular grid near the White Sound Channel entrance, where we believe she went overboard. The northern tip of Lubbers and Porgy Rock formed a tight search triangle right in that zone, our primary target area. We considered if he got disoriented,
Or if the timeline and location he gave us simply didn't match reality.
We spent 2 more hours canvassing that sector,
Running tight grid patterns back and forth across that entire triangle.
My eyes were locked on the seabed from the bow, scanning for anomalies. A body in those waters should have been highly visible.
The sea there is exceptionally clear and relatively shallow, aiding our search.
Yet, nothing.
We deployed aerial drone sweeps, side-scan sonar, and full air support. The Coast Guard dispatched fixed-wing aircraft to assist. They flew systematic search grids from Marsh Harbor down to the husband's alleged point of incident. Simultaneously, our ground units conducted meticulous shoreline searches along this entire stretch, covering Elbow Cay, as well as the coast of Lubbers Cay, the smaller landmass directly to the west.
3 full days of intensive search yielded 0 clues. Unpredictable wind conditions initially complicated our efforts on those first days,
hindering us from deploying aerial drones until Tuesday morning.
We scanned the entire northern shore of Lubbers, not a single trace.
The sole piece of evidence recovered
Was a green flotation device located by our marine search units during active patrol.
Where exactly did they recover it? Just a few hundred feet from the dinghy's final location.
On the surface, this supported the suspect's statement that he threw the device,
Attempting a rescue, assuming the vessel drifted that way. The flotation device lay remarkably close by. But scientifically, this raises questions.
You are looking at a vast open stretch.
Yet a thrown safety device and a drifting dinghy supposedly followed the exact same drift trajectory. Does that sound plausible?
Landing within mere yards?
True, environmental factors like wind direction dictate where objects drift, but matching that path so closely is highly anomalous. Now, we must analyze another major point of interest. He claims Lynette went overboard holding the dry bag with their passports. Let us focus closely on this specific detail. This is a key piece of the puzzle. According to him, Brian insists she went into the water with that waterproof bag containing their passports and the spare key to the electric motor. Indeed. A standard dry bag should float. That is basic physics. Yet absolutely nothing has been recovered. To my knowledge, investigators have found absolutely no trace of it. Was a size or description ever provided? Apparently, they never did. The rescue worker made it clear that he is not police, purposely keeping his distance from the actual criminal investigation. He was simply there for search and rescue. He was focused entirely on executing whatever tasks the police investigators requested of them. Their main directive was to thoroughly canvass the immediate area. But that sweep turned up absolutely nothing. Still, we must examine the recovered dinghy. The life vest was recovered a few hundred feet south of the vessel, specifically drifting down toward Witch's Point. That was the extent of it. No dry bag was recovered, and absolutely no other debris was found that could link back to her vessel. If we analyze the search grid they mapped out, looking from Elbow Cay, past Lubbers, all the way to Marsh Harbor, 4 miles in the distance, is it plausible that a drifting, unmanned boat would have inevitably washed him ashore on Lubbers Cay? Or would it have instead somehow cleared that island and drifted all the way across to his actual landing point at Marsh Harbor? It is a razor-thin margin, but calculating her entry point and the wind vectors at the time, we find that his version of events remains highly plausible. His explanation cannot be easily ruled out. Assuming she went overboard at that coordinate, the local winds would naturally push the dinghy right to its final recovery spot. Now, you and I need to look closely at what is actually in our makeup. Most of us worry constantly about the food we consume, the water we drink, and protecting our families from toxins. Yet, we daily cover our faces in cosmetics packed with complex, unpronounceable chemicals. Your skin is your body's largest organ, meaning it absorbs everything you put on it. Which is exactly why I recommend Tups & Company. Here is what stands out. Their clean liquid foundation and face primer do not just mask your skin, they actively nourish it. Traditional cosmetics need constant touch-ups, often leaving your pores feeling heavy and completely clogged. But this formula feels remarkably light, never cakes, and easily lasts through the entire day. If you are done risking your skin with mystery chemicals, there is a better way. You can simplify your daily routine and feel truly confident about what your skin absorbs. Go to tupsandco.com/Banfield. They are offering my listeners 25% off your first order using code Banfield. Again, that is Tups & Company. Let me spell it. TOUPSANDCO.com/Banfield. Just use code BANFIELD to get 25% off your first order. Or simply click the direct link provided in the description below. When we first boarded Soulmate at anchor, let's examine the final spot where Lynette and Brian anchored before heading to the Abaco Inn. Neither returned that night.
That is, if
you actually buy Brian's story. Supposedly, they never reached their vessel. During the initial boarding, how far from shore was it anchored? Roughly 200 yards.
Not a massive distance, especially for someone experienced with handling boats.
It looked much like that blue boat.
Or perhaps the white one.
The white hull positioned right out there in the background, yes, that exact vessel. Meaning they were close to shore. Naturally, the closer you tuck into the shoreline, the more you shield yourself from the heavy wind. He had anchored directly off Aunt Pat's Bay, right there. Just 200 yards out. Roughly. Now, did he ever specify the exact coordinates where she fell overboard? No, he wasn't interrogated them. The details weren't discussed that evening. His demeanor, strangely, was entirely matter-of-fact. His sole, urgent focus was raising the anchor and rushing back to Marsh Harbor to collect his family. A convenient focus. Now, picture their dinghy, an 8-foot vessel. It is incredibly small and vulnerable. When leaving the Abaco Inn, you would naturally hug the shallow shoreline for safety. You avoid taking the main channel out into deeper water, unlike the larger vessels that require much deeper drafts. A tiny dinghy has no problem skimming over a mere 2 feet of shallow coastal water. Precisely. This means their trajectory kept them very close to the coastline, taking a direct, straight line right back to their yacht. Especially if you are traveling in rapidly fading light. Specifically around 7:30 in the evening. Right. And they were powered by a minuscule outboard motor, perhaps only 2 to 4 horsepower, extremely weak. It was actually a small electric motor. Now, you and I have to ask, isn't that the most likely scenario? They would have cut the corner to stay tight to the shoreline. But what about predators, sharks in those shallow waters? Absolutely. I can guarantee that aggressive bull sharks patrol that exact area every single day at sundown. Right at dusk. And right at dusk, local fishermen return around 5:30 p.m., drawing heavy predator activity. Correct. Especially near Marty's Creek, located further down south. That specific creek is a known hotspot for sharks. Several local docks are situated right there, where fishermen discard offal at twilight. That location is one of their primary feeding grounds. Ultimately, indeed, it is common knowledge among the locals that these waters are heavily infested with predators. Yet, documented attacks on humans remain exceedingly rare. To my knowledge, only one attack has occurred here in 15 years. Let's hope that luck holds. But on these isolated islands, that is just the harsh reality. My sources raised a critical point. If a shark had indeed attacked her, we would find some physical trace. You and I both know a torn life vest or clothing would eventually wash ashore. For a predator to devour an entire human body without a trace seems highly improbable. Exactly. Our search of the shoreline revealed absolutely zero signs of a violent struggle within 200 yards of the coast. Precisely. Indeed. When we analyze his brief interaction with Brian, how long did it actually last? Was it roughly 1 hour of critical observation time? Much less, perhaps 30 to 45 minutes maximum. Did the suspect exhibit defensive behavior or offer calculated alibis for the victim's sudden disappearance? On the contrary, his demeanor was highly detached, focusing only on immediate tasks. He projected the typical commanding authority that you would expect from an experienced boat captain, giving direct orders to everyone on board, demanding immediate compliance, directing each specific action, and then initiating a rapid departure without any hesitation. A highly controlled, efficient performance under intense psychological pressure. Let's look closer at this.
Our primary witness has decades of search and rescue experience. During our preliminary debriefing, before the formal interrogation, he noted that in a tight-knit island community, first responders face a unique professional burden. They routinely recover the bodies of neighbors, friends, and people they have known for their entire lives. He understands the stark reality of maritime accidents and drowning victims. What does his seasoned perspective tell us about this entire incident?
The inconsistencies are highly troubling. Crucial investigative questions remain entirely unanswered.
Several anomalies do not align with a standard rescue profile, particularly regarding the timeline of events that the suspect reported. Yet we must consider how rapidly a sequence of poor maritime decisions cascades into catastrophe. One tactical error quickly triggers a chain reaction of failures,
Becoming lethal.
in mere seconds, even in calmer waters,
And this occurred within the protected coastal zone.
which complicates our analysis significantly.
While I strive to remain completely objective during this inquiry,
I must focus entirely on the hard evidence, even though massive gaps in the story remain. Clearly, the complete absence of any physical remains of the victim is deeply distressing for her family.
my primary duty as an investigator in this case is to find the truth and bring closure.
In analyzing this mystery, you and I must avoid premature judgment.
We are investigators, not the police or the Coast Guard. My role is not to immediately declare malicious intent or assume criminal guilt before the facts are clear. We cannot assume what his true intentions were, or
Ultimately, he is the only person who knows exactly what happened that night. But, as any investigator knows, situations on the water can escalate instantly. When navigating the unpredictable currents of the open sea,
If you make the wrong split-second decisions,
the entire situation spirals completely out of control.
in his statement, he admitted he failed to deploy the anchor quickly enough. He stated they were drinking, had no life jackets, and missed the anchor. Let's look at his story. If true, it points to a sequence of poor choices. But if his narrative is fabricated, and that is a massive if, we simply do not know.
Should our search teams have located her by now? Given these treacherous maritime conditions, we must rely on hope. We search for any tangible clue
That will bring us closer to reconstructing the truth of that fateful night. Yet, nearly 2 full weeks have passed.
We are approaching the 14-day mark this weekend. That is an immense window of time to survive adrift, assuming his account is accurate.
Either way, you and I know the search must continue without pause.
We will systematically sweep every grid sector and pursue every lead.
Analyzing every angle. We must map out every plausible theory, searching for forensic evidence to validate or debunk each scenario. That is the essence of our investigation.
the community stands behind the search efforts,
striving to provide the victim's family with the closure and answers they desperately deserve.
With her daughter arriving and her mother devastated, the stakes are incredibly high.
Left completely in the dark, they need resolution. We must find the truth.
We highly value this dedicated service.
A selfless effort coordinated by the local volunteer fire and rescue teams. Their work is vital. The Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue operates purely on a volunteer basis. They survive entirely on contributions from property owners, seasonal travelers, and the very people they rescue, receiving zero funding from government agencies. They are completely dependent on private donations to fund their essential survival gear,
Along with specialized training, ongoing vessel maintenance, and vital fuel for their search boats. Visit htvfr.org to support them.
That is Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue.org, correct?
VFBAR. Exactly. htvfr.org for donations.
Understood. An admirable effort. We hope they find the answers soon.
We appreciate their crucial cooperation and total candor during this active case.
Every detail helps